What if I told you that you can bring the best of two worlds by using Adobe Express and Miro to plan your brand and even collaborate with your teams and others by not leaving Miro, but being able to use Adobe Express at the same time? One of the biggest challenges I've seen so many of my clients encounter, and especially when I worked as an in-house designer, is brand consistency. Whether you're starting small, you have a small team, your team is growing, making sure that you are all on the same page and have your brand assets that are consistent is a challenge. But if you're working with a team or you're needing to create content, how do you ensure or how do you even compare what type of content you have? What I'm going to show you is how you can pull Miro and Adobe Express to look at your brand so that you can do audits or even be on the same page. Now, what I'm giving you is a quick overview of the back end with what I've set up with Adobe Express. You want to make sure that if you have access to Adobe Express Premium, which you see over here, you'll be able to create brand kits, define your brand colors, upload your logos, your fonts, and create templates, as well as adding any graphics. This is going to be the foundation to making sure that all of your assets are consistent. Once you have that done, what I recommend is setting up a project folder. To set up a project folder, you're going to go over to your stuff, click on projects, and just click on create a new project. If you don't have any projects, then you'll see a slightly different window. And I cover this in more detail in another YouTube tutorial, which I am linking over here. Once you have created the project, it's going to be much easier for you to manage all of your assets, especially as you're growing. This will really help you as you start to hire other people or your team expands. Now you can see a lot of my files over here. What I recommend is creating folders to set up your content. Now we talked about Miro. How does Miro help us in managing our brand assets? Let's say that you are going to have a team meeting or you're bringing someone on board to help you. What I really recommend is creating a Miro board to bring in all your designs so that you can actually have a more structured outlook in your processes. So what I've done here is first, I needed to make sure that I integrated Adobe Express with Miro. To do that, click on the plus icon and you can search for Adobe Express. Once you're on this page, it's going to ask you to log into your Adobe Express account. Go ahead and do that. If you don't have one, you can create a free account. And what I ended up doing is once I was connected, I clicked on the pin tool so that it shows up here on my menu, making it easy for me to access at any time. To save us some time, I went ahead and imported some of my content and grouped it depending on what the purpose was. So I have some event content, some sales, some brand awareness design, and some slide decks. To do this, it's fairly straightforward. What I would recommend is just to create a frame. So I'm clicking on this frame option and you can click on any of the other options here. I'm just going to click on custom and it adds a new frame for me. This allows me to group my elements together and move them easily. So I'm just going to delete on this new frame, but let's say we needed to move events so that we can kind of have this side by side with sales. We can easily do this. This is going to help you get this initial structure. So think about all the types of branded content that you've created in different types of marketing or different types of output. So that way you can start to structure and group them together. Then what I did was I went to Adobe Express to look for those files. So let me show you how we did this. I want to add a couple more templates that I had for brand awareness. So we're going to click on the icon for Adobe Express. That's going to open Adobe Express inside Miro. So you'll see here, it says we're inside Miro, but it's telling you it's powered by Adobe Express. So this is a really powerful partnership. Then what you're going to do is if you're starting fresh, this is a great way for you to collaborate with others by looking at templates over here. Just keep in mind that anytime you are working inside Miro with Adobe Express, you at this moment are not able to co-collaborate like you would normally do inside Adobe Express, meaning two people can work on the file at the same time. If you want to do that, what I recommend is just sharing the direct link from Adobe Express and doing that process inside Adobe Express, not in Miro. For now, let's go back to talking about how we can add some of this content. I mentioned using projects earlier to kind of keep our content organized. So that's what we're doing. I'm going back to my projects folder. Then I'm going to click on the project folder, and then I see all of my files here, which were the ones that I shared with you earlier. Now I want to make sure that I include some of my files that I have worked on, and let's go ahead and add this particular file. Now what it's going to do is that it's going to ask me to add these as pages. This process right now is essentially creating a whole new file inside Adobe Express. So you won't necessarily be editing the original file. So just keep that in mind. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm adding all the pages. So we're going to select add as pages. And I'm going to delete the very first page. This is just kind of a standard that happens. Now I can see all of my content in here and it's good to go. Now, what I want to do is click on save. There are a couple of options that you can do. For organization purposes, I don't include all of the images that are included in this. So this is a carousel post. Now there's things that I want to make sure that we edit. For now, we're not going to edit. We're going to do the process of adding this in. But to make it easier, I'm not going to select all of the content. I just want to include the first image. Then you're going to click on save, and you'll have the option to either select all the pages and save it as a PNG format, or if you're using something that has some sort of video animation, you'll have the option to include the MP4 video into your board. Just keep in mind, if your internet bandwidth is a little slow, it's going to take a little bit of time. Now I clicked on save, and now it's adding that to my board. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this to the section. Remember how we're putting everything into a section for ease of just structure. And now it shows up as untitled asset. So this is essentially creating a new file for us inside Adobe Express using Miro. And I'm just going to talk about how this is a template for stress awareness carousel. Having a naming convention for each of this is really helpful as you are including your content and having other people review it. That way you know, okay, this is a hiking checklist, this is another hiking checklist, this is a tip infographic, and this will just help your process maintain structure and integrity when you're managing your brand assets. Now, this is looking great. I can go in and review a few of my other items. Now let's go and add one more thing. I'm gonna go back to Adobe Express, and there was a newsletter that we were using that I wanna make sure that we include for review. We're gonna go back to your stuff, go to projects, find that project folder. And since there was two variations or two sections to that newsletter, I added both of those pages. Now I actually do want to include both of them in my Miro preview. So I selected them all. Now I'm going to click on save, and I can see that it's selected all pages, and I just want a PNG version. We're going to click on save. Now it's adding that to our board. Okay, so now I can actually start to see all of my content here on Miro. Now there's a lot more templates that I have, so you can go in and all of your templates. This will be really helpful as you're running a brand audit to see what's not really on brand, what needs to get changed. And what is really powerful about doing this is if you're working with a team and you just need to have a big, broad bird's eye view, this is how you can bring things together. Now, let's say you're doing this process and you notice, hey, we need to make a few edits on this. This is why I really love this partnership that Adobe Express and Miro have, because not only are we just including the images, if I was to click on this section over here, it's gonna reopen that same file inside Adobe Express. And now I can go in and make changes to that design. Now we included both of those pages in our Miro board. Now what I'm going to do is let's make a few changes over here. We're going to change this color to one of these other lighter colors, and we're going to change the color of the text. And now it's a little bit easier to read. And then this second page, I want to make a few changes because here the head is being covered by some of this text. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller, just as to the right. And of course, for accessibility, I want to make sure that this text is a lot more legible. So we're going to change the color and change this color over here. And as I just mentioned, accessibility, one of the great things that we can use the full-scale Adobe Express app inside Miro is that you can actually even use add-ons to test for accessibility and a lot of other things. I will include a link to how you can test accessibility and even run a color blindness simulator in another YouTube tutorial, which I'm including the link over here. But for now, this is a really great way for you to make some quick and easy changes. Once you are done, then you can click on Save and Replace. If you do save as new, it's just going to create a new section inside that board. And what I want to do is I just want to make sure that everything is saved, and I'm going to save and replace. Then what it's going to do is it's going to update my files over here, and depending on how many changes you made or how big your files are and your internet bandwidth, it may take a little bit to see the update. The one challenge of doing this process is as you have added new files into Miro, they're also becoming new files into Adobe Express. So one thing that I highly recommend is go back to your Adobe Express account. You'll see here recent files. Then what I would do is you can't right now necessarily move it. You have the opportunity to show the location, but what you can do is just click on the file, and then once the file is open, go to File, move the file, and move it to where you want it to go. So I would move it to that project folder that we had designated. That way, any changes that get made through the Miro collaboration, I'll be able to easily access them. If this does sound like it's a little bit challenging and maybe you just want quick input and insight, what you can do is you can share the original file or look for the actual direct link from some of your existing files. Click on the share button, grab the actual link, copy that link, and then go into your Miro board and add the direct link. So select whichever file you want to select and then add a link to that specific project folder inside Adobe Express. Now there's a lot of workarounds, but I did want to make sure that you guys had a clear idea of how you can use this collaboration with Miro and Adobe Express. For me, the most powerful way to use this is for brand management, especially if you're going to run a campaign and want to see what types of templates you have or what types of templates need to get changed, and use Miro and Adobe Express to review your content. The last thing that I want to cover is, let's say people on your team aren't familiar with Adobe Express or don't really necessarily want to open the file. They may look at some of these things over here and say, hey, I just want to make a quick edit. You can stay inside Miro to make those edits. So you can use some of the tools here on Miro and just select this and add your note. You can use a little post-it. Let's add that and change the color. Hard to read. And this way you can have people start to make notes and quick changes that way. So there's so many ways that you can use this as you're working with Miro and Adobe Express. So just for a quick recap, we did cover a lot. What you want to do is start to section your types of content, whether it's sales, event, brand awareness, your slide decks, and bring them into a frame. That way, if you need to move anything, it's easy for you to move and it stays grouped. Then connect your Adobe Express account inside Miro and start to import some of the files that you're using into each section. Thanks for watching. We have an entire playlist where you can learn more right over here.